Thank you, Wilson. This was a great idea, and I'm so glad that you have continued to work on it until here we are right now. And also thank you to Doug and Leslie for your work in getting this together and pulling people together. And I'm sorry you're sick, but in any case, it took a lot of people to get us here today. I just wanted to introduce very briefly the panel so you know who's who. Oh, sorry. This is for posterity, right? Okay, so one of the things I want to say about this particular group of people is that, first of all, not one of them was born in Maine, but all of them live in Maine and have lived a large part of their lives in Maine. Some of us went away for school or some other things for a while, but people by and large came back or stayed here. And so it's really kind of a wonderful thought that, it wasn't just a flash in the pan, it wasn't just an experiment, but it was really a change of life for everybody and a building of a community that's still thriving and growing. So I just want to say that. Okay, our panelists today are Phyllis Hill first. She lives in Bath, Maine, and she has a daughter, son-in-law, and 3 grandchildren. And one of her grandchildren is here with her today. She's staying with her, Aurelia. So Phyllis came here with a group of us. A lot of people came to settle on Twitchell Hill in Montville in the summer of 1971. You're going to hear that over and over in these stories. Phyllis had gone to Boston to go to school at Northeastern University, where she became very involved in the resistance to the Vietnam War. She also had a kind of personal interest in the idea of collective living, and so she established a collective household in a brownstone in Boston, and that was kind of the beginning of the group that ended up coming to Twitchell Hill. So that's, and Phyllis grew up in Pennsylvania. Okay. So I'm going to let you start. Oh, sorry, not yet. I'm going to introduce everyone. The next panelist is David Smith, who many of you know, lives with his wife, Linda, and their dog, Meatball, in Belfast. David has 2 grown children. He came to Maine from 690 Mass Avenue in Boston, which was the house that Phyllis had found to rent. And he was also an anti-war activist, also a Northeastern student, and a community activist as well. He was one of the first people to come to settle at Twitchell Hill, head of the larger group, and in the first crew to set up the tent and kind of get everything ready. And he grew up in Connecticut. So the next person will be Vernon, again, I think well known to many of you. Came to Montville, lives in Montville now with his wife Helga on Twitchell Hill in an off-the-grid house that he himself built. He came with the group from 690 in the summer of 1971 after he had attended Northeast University, majoring in engineering, which would prove to be helpful later, and very involved in the anti-war movement as well. Vernon grew up in Connecticut. Debbie Lasky. Debbie lives in Liberty, and we love those words, we love those names, with her husband, Mike. She has 2 grown children and 2 grandchildren. She came to Maine to join with people from 690 to settle on Twitchell Hill in the summer of 1971 from Exeter, New Hampshire, where she lived with a group of friends and fellow activists on Wobbly Farm. Debbie grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Maine, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, not Brooklyn, Maine. The real Brooklyn, yes. No, Brooklyn with a Y. Okay, Tim Biggs lives in Freedom with his wife, what's her name? Pam, and has 3 grown children and 1 grandchildren. He came to Freedom in 1971 as a dropout student, or were you finished?
I dropped out of Rutgers.
Oh, okay.
I flunked out of Rutgers and I went to university.
So he was living. So he finished. He did 2 years at Unity College and then came here. And I believe he's been in the area since.
Yeah.
But he grew up in New Jersey. And then Mia Beale. She currently lives in the New Meadows area of Brunswick, Maine. And it turns out, she didn't know this, but it's ancestral places in her family in that same little area of Brunswick. And a house that she helped design and build. She has one daughter and 2 grandsons. She came to Waldo County in July 1971 from the Franklin commune in Vermont after having been involved in the New York City draft resistance movement and having lived in Cambridge as an active participant in the Ecology Action Center and activities. She grew up in Philadelphia. So I am the last one. I'm going to be also on the panel because I was just a panelist till Doug got sick. I currently live in Brunswick, Maine, where I have lived for 37 years with my husband, Brooks, and we raised sheep and 2 boys. And a bunch of dogs and all that. I arrived at Twitchell Hill in Montville, Maine in July 1971 with others. I had just celebrated my 22nd birthday a couple of weeks before. I had been living in Boston at 690, as I said, and involved in community and anti-war activism. And I was born and raised in Boston. But I would also like to mention something to everybody here, which is today, almost to the day, I think it was May 3rd, 55 years ago, Phyllis, Vernon, and I and others were arrested on the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. It's our 55th anniversary. And Dave, I'm sorry, and David. Phyllis, David, Vernon, and myself, and others, in our group and other groups, we were arrested while protesting the Vietnam War, and just 2 months before we came to live in Maine. But I do want to tell them that. All right, so we're going to start with Phyllis leading. Oh, sorry. I'll put them in the
Okay, you want to say?
Can you hear her?
Okay, I'm Phyllis, and you would bring up the arrest story. There are so many stories to tell that we could be here for a long, long time. But I wanted to say when I left rural Pennsylvania, I couldn't wait to get to the city. To me, the countryside didn't seem to have much promising, and I was really curious, and I wanted to just run straight at life, whatever it had to offer at that time. And 1966 was a really interesting year to start running at life because it started running back. And so what I wanted to do was to find my people, and I did. And I wanted to find a way to live together so that we could explore the things that we thought were important, that were interesting, that were worth doing, or were just plain fun. We just wanted to enjoy life and do something that was meaningful. And so one after another, I think David I met first, actually, after a political demonstration at Northeastern University, and then Vernon, and then Debbie, and it just kept rolling on. And this collective household was just a whole bunch of hard-headed individualists deciding that they were going to have common meals and discuss late into the night and bring at least 2 or 3 terrific albums home every Friday, new music. It was great. And a lot of marijuana, which now that it's legal, we can say. Ahead of the curve on that one. So at a certain point, though, when you're not a student in Boston anymore and you've already been arrested and you've had tensions with the police, and Boston is actually on fire, and the part of Boston that you live in was deemed the ghetto, although one of our professors at Northeastern, who had a background in Eastern Europe, thought that it was a ridiculous thing for these white Americans to refer to that part of the Boston that we lived in as a ghetto. They know nothing about ghettos, she said. But it was in a state of dilapidation. So we had a choice. What were we going to do with all these things that we thought were important and worth following? We weren't actually students anymore, so we weren't embedded in an academic system. So there was a choice. Which way? Which way do we go? And a whole bunch of us decided at different stages, actually, in different configurations, that we wanted to move to the country. We wanted to make the life that we thought was important. And so we wound up doing exactly that when land became available in Montville at a price we could afford. Should I say it, what the price was? Yeah. 1971. So we got 70 acres for $7,500.
Wait, but the locals thought we had been taken.
We'd been taken. We'd been had. But did we care? No. Do we know how to build a house? No. Do we have tools? Not really. Vernon had a couple of hammers. You know, so we didn't know what we were doing. We had no business doing any of it, but we did it anyway. And so it was terrific. But we sort of thought two things. One, this local community that we had moved in, we thought that there would be hostility and rejection. Probably likely friends in communal houses in Vermont had experienced their gardens being run over by trucks in the night and that sort of thing, because there was a tension with the counterculture movement versus, you know, the rest of the United States. And so we kind of thought maybe that would be our fate. And people started, you know, we were driving down the isolated roads at the time, and when other people would pass by and they'd do this, we'd say, what are they doing? It must be, you know, like flipping us a bird. Turns out it was hello. You know, who knew? Hello. Well, okay, hello back. So we were greeted with a kind of tolerant warmth, I would have to say. And then we started to meet people locally, and again, met with people like Henry Peavy and the sheriff, currently the sheriff, and a farmer. And he was sort of like, what are you doing here? Like, don't you know about wine levels? You know, Vernon has a million stories, but Vernon always connected with Henry, and Henry connected with us, and soon we were helping with bring in his hay. So we weren't the enemy. And I think the attitude we were met with was, okay, they're entertaining, fun, let's watch, but will they make it through the winter? Probably not. But we did. And we kept coming back to continue the building. And the more we did that, the more we were met with not only tolerance, but acceptance, and also, so what have you got to offer in the community? And the Maine's, you know, townhouse community political organization really suited the kind of political engagement that I think we were longing for, because it's local, it's practical, it's human, and it's, you know, and it makes you feel good to problem solve together. So we inadvertently, from being, you know, at odds with our government, found ourselves possible to make relationship to the forces of government, and that was great. Same thing for education. Like, a number of us wound up teaching in Strawberry Field School in the Center of Freedom, now across from what's now famous as the Lost Kitchen. But that was our school, you know, for kids. So everything that we cared about, the attitude was not a passive one, like, why isn't there a this? Why isn't there a that? It was like, what can we make to make happen to improve the situation or add on to it or have value added? You know, so for me, there were a million more things. You know, it was a privilege to live here in Maine. I learned a lot. There was a lot of respect for how the values that Maine represents. And it's like, oh, and then we discovered that there were other people like us. Who knew? Right? So that just expanded everything. And I think I have to pass this to David.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you.
Now we'll hear from David.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I just really had a hard time figuring out what I was going to say. I came here in 1971, and I'm still here, and I ain't going anywhere. Anyway, I thought about one way to deal with this was to, instead of start from the beginning, start at the end and work backwards. So this morning, I'm going to go to I'll go back to the beginning. I promise. But this morning I was having breakfast with a bunch of men. It's like a men's group that has breakfast together, and it's been around for about 36 years. in Belfast. And I feel really grateful to the guys that have just started coming and kept coming all these years. I kind of was off and on, but in my old age, I've made a commitment to the men's group. And before I came here this morning, we had men's gathering at Belle the Cat. I thought about one of my journal entries. I kept journals. I have a pile, but I left them home. And I thought about one of my journal entries. It said something about the women were having a meeting. I wonder what the men did. Maybe we had a meeting too. At any rate, this may have been the kind of natural event that resulted in the real thing. Now, the men's movement is a big thing. That's like supposed to be funny. But I don't really remember what the men did. Oh, well, I know we smoked pot. We definitely got high. All right. So I thought about this. Why don't I work backwards? Remember, yeah. All right. Yep. I already said that. Okay. So I love my co-op story. I've been a loyal member and worked on the co-op when it first started. And we had these long sheets of paper that, if you wanted to get together with your friends, you could order a case of broccoli. And we went down, and we were doing that in Boston. But I come up to the cashiers at the co-op and I say, I'm number 50. and some of them say, oh, cool. and then one day I went up to say, I'm number 50. And the person behind me said, I'm number 1. And I don't think he'd mind me saying his name. No. He's a wonderful man who lives in Brooks, came to Brooks and settled there, Peter Baldwin. So he's number 1. And I'm going to mention one more, going backwards a little bit. The May Day thing with Phyllis, myself, Vernon, and Susan were there. If the government doesn't stop the war, we'll stop the government. So the idea was to get into like DuPont Circle, and sit down and stop it. But that all had some effect, but it didn't really work very well because the streets got cleared off quite efficiently by the police. But what about 5,000 of this, about 50,000 people did? They went up and sat on the steps. We went up and sat, and we joined this group and sat on the steps, and we were all herded in. Shortly after that, we were herded into buses and taken to underground to Washington, D.C. lockups, which were small rooms that you could fit 3 or 4 of the rooms, and they put about 100 of us in each room. And Vernon and I were in the same room together. And we did friggin' good. We helped the people. We sang a lot. Well, I think there was only one bathroom, and there were a lot of people in that little room that we didn't fit. And so the story is so extraordinary that Ron Dellums took the government to court for the denial of our First Amendment rights, and we won. We won a monetary settlement from the government for the denial of our First Amendment rights. So I wanted to just really emphasize that and the thing about this was this was a Twitchell Hill group that went in May of '71, only a few months before we came up to Twitchell Hill. So how much time do I have? Am I running out?
Let's see, sorry.
Oh.
I was listening. You have about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna read. With my journaling, I wrote about 20 little stories, and bless my daughter Laurel, Mia over. Hi Mia. Mia is Laurel's mother. And Twitchell Hill Commune, this is called the first 2 weeks. In July of 1971, a group of young people that included many former Northeastern University anti-war protesters came to Twitchell Hill in Montville, eager to build a new life. Earlier, a number of the group had been working with the Students for a Democratic Society at Northeastern. Many were also living communally, occupying a townhouse in the south end of Boston. Phyllis was mentioned. In 1967, my sophomore year at Northeastern, I joined up with STS and started protesting the war in Vietnam and supporting the civil rights movement. It wasn't long before I moved in with my friends. I actually never moved in to anywhere except Twitchell Hill. In 1969, our group had become 2 groups, one living on a farm in New Hampshire, the other staying in Boston. Everyone had pretty much quit school, and we were either working or doing some sort of political organizing. In Boston, we organized a food co-op, a daycare center, and even a free bus that ran from the south end of Boston to Cambridge. We called all this the Free Life Network. Who thought of that? Anyone here on the panel thought? Yeah, I think Vernon thought of that. I didn't think, I was like a foot soldier. I didn't really go to a lot of meetings, but I enthusiastically participated. We purchased, in the spring of '71, plans were made for the 2 communes to unite and move to Maine. Although I was not closely involved in discussion leading up to the move, I do remember being influenced by Helen and Scott Nearing's book, Living the Good Life. Here in this book was a description of 2 radicals who moved to the country from New York City, where they grew their own food and lived in peace away from the big city. We decided to leave Boston and live the life we imagined. In order for we purchased, going to build a house. All right. This story is about the first 2 weeks. In order to get the group settled on the hill, a plan was devised. A big army tent was purchased, and 4 of us were designated to ride up to Maine 2 weeks ahead of the time and set up in preparation for the arrival of the entire group. We had a 1970 4-wheel drive Ford Bronco with Ferb driving, Henry and Ruth in the front seat, and me in the back on top of the tent. There wasn't much room for me in the back of on top of the tent and back, but I didn't care. My life wasn't going so well, so I was happy to make a big change and be part of the prep crew.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's a good place to stop.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
Just don't shake so much.
Hey, Siri. Oh, I'm sorry, Siri. Hi, I'm Vernon. I found out about 2 hours ago, an hour and a half, no, sooner than I'm going to be on this panel, so I have nothing prepared. When all of us were living in a group house in Boston, as we said, we wanted to go up to the country. And so what we sort of did was draw a circle around Boston, 4 hours out. That was as far as Jack wanted to go. And so I spent a lot of time, a little bit of time in Western Mass, a lot of time in Vermont, going to different communes. That's where I met Mia. She was at a commune there. And I had learned early on when you visit communes, if you go right to the kitchen and start washing dishes, people really are happy. You're there. So I learned that quick. So anyway, we looked all through Vermont, couldn't find anything. I had summered in Maine as a kid, and somebody told me about this area, Waldo County. Now, Waldo County had a big chicken industry in the late 60s and the 70s, and it died. And this place was, Waldo County and Washington County were the 2 poorest counties in the country. And so this was ripe for this back to the land movement to be centered here. So we came up to Montville, and there were eventually 4 communes in town. And one of them was formed on the basis of an ad in the Village Voice. And they were challenged getting their garden in. So we tried to help them. The Whitten Hill people we were friends with, and Sandy and John, yeah, those folks. But so when we came, the local authorities were a little upset. sometimes we had 45 people up there on the weekends. And we had read Helen Scott Nearing's book about living the good life. So I went over to talk to Helen Scott, and they said the house was too big. We couldn't do a house that big out of stone. I didn't believe him. So. And he was fooling around with Ruth Stout at the time. I don't know if you know about this. You know the gardener, Ruth Stout?
Yes.
Yeah? They had an affair. Yeah. Oh, I know all the inside. So we got up here, and the local authorities were quite curious, and I gave them tours. And then the district attorney came up for some reason, and he saw our Jerusalem artichoke patch. And somehow, I found out later, he told somebody of a higher authority we were growing marijuana. And you remember the time they had those helicopter gunships, the guys at the machine guns over the field. That was during Nixon's time. You remember that? The helicopter. And then
I remember the spray plane.
spray plane, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then they got me a job at to watch the floor for fires up on top of Fry Mountain. And then I ended up getting the state to agree that we could share it. The whole county could share this job looking for forest fires. And we did that for a couple years, but it's really boring. But this was a very cheap place. Somebody mentioned that some of the land was going for $18 an acre 2 years before we got here. Anybody that paid $49 told us we got ripped off at $69. But this was a very poor area. There were a lot of chickens on the side of the road. It looked a lot different. But what was I? Oh, and so this thing with the police were really, they were curious. And then eventually, they realized we weren't any problem. The head of the state police came up and he told me he didn't care if we smoked marijuana, but did marijuana, but we only keep it to ourselves. Don't, let the local people come up and do it. And they did it anyway. But and then when Patty Hearst got kidnapped, the feds came up. And they knew where people were who had no phone, who were renting places in town. So I don't know how the heck. And then that thing in Washington where they got arrested, I got arrested once on the stuff, but I got arrested on the way there driving a church van. They knew the license plate. They had the license plate number on that van, so I didn't even get to D.C. They stole the van and put me in jail.
But you were in that cell with me.
Yeah, that was from the second arrest. I got out and I went in again.
Sally Gowell's band, philosophy professor, Northeastern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then they arrested me twice that week. And only bologna sandwiches. That's what pissed me off. So getting back to Waldo County, with all these people doing stuff coming from away, we got the food co-op going. We got the. That's about it. But most of the people who had to find jobs, they all became nurses and teachers. There was nobody that made any money. So, is my time up? Yes. Oh, good.
You're a hard act to follow. I didn't get the email that told me I should write something out, so this is sort of off the top of my head. So there's a whole backstory to the people from Twitchell Hill, because we started out in Boston. They mentioned 690. There was another house around the corner, 39 East Springfield Street, which is where we all first started. Boston got kind of scary and less friendly, and the people on Springfield Street started looking for someplace else to be, and we started looking for land, ended up in New Hampshire, which was not very friendly either. And then reconnected with the people who were at 690 who also were ready to get out of the city, and we ended up here. When we were in New Hampshire, the cops would just stop us. And one time we were going to get ice cream, and my friend Bruce was driving, and he said, "We're just going to get ice cream." And he pulls himself, "We know where you're going." It was like, okay, you're watching us, very interesting. We got up here, and we heard about this guy down the road who sold milk out of his milk room. And we had never been able to get our neighbor to sell us milk because he didn't trust us in New Hampshire. So I went down to talk to Henry Peavy to see if he would sell us milk, and he gave me this funny look like, of course I'll sell you milk. And we had no money, no containers. We said, we come back. He says, no, wait a minute. He went into the milk house. He came out with 2 brand new stainless steel gallon containers full of milk, handed them to me and said, here, pay me when you see me next. And I walked away thinking, I'm home. I have found home. And he turned out to be a wonderful friend to us, helping us build the house. And when I was a child in Brooklyn, there was the whole thing about, it was the 1950s, and it was all the bomb scares and fallout shelters and all that. And I spent a good deal of time being afraid when people would start talking about that. And the only time I felt safe was when I was at my uncle's place in the Catskills. And I remembered that. And when we got here, and I met Henry, and just being up on Twitchell, it was like, I feel safe. This is home. I feel really safe. And yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have any skills. I don't know why we thought we could do this. We read Helen and Scott's book. We know how to do this. Nobody got hurt. Nothing major, really bad happened. We built this incredible building. Eventually, it reached a point where working on the food co-op it was great, and it was wonderful organizing people, meeting new people, and getting this whole organization of food co-ops going, but it didn't pay any money. And so people started looking for work. I started looking for work, which eventually ended me up working for family planning. And from that, I moved on to going back to school and becoming a nurse. I had dropped out of Northeastern because I thought working on the anti-war movement and food co-ops was more important. But I came back to it. And I worked as a nurse for many years. Met an amazing community of people who, if they weren't sure about us, and they were maybe muttering under their breath about the damn hippies, they stood back and watched. They didn't set up roadblocks. They just watched to see what we were going to do. And as a group, we went to the townhouse in Montville and helped re-nail the floor. We just sort of showed up with our hammers and went to work, and we re-nailed the floor with the guy who was running the project. Another time we went out with Henry Peavy and planted trees, spent a day planting trees. And I think we just showed people who we were, that we weren't scary. We weren't trying to turn their kids into dope fiends. And we wanted to be part of a community. And we have become a part of this community. I wouldn't imagine living anywhere else.
Do I have to push a button here or just hold it up?
Nope, just hold it. Just hold it up.
Okay. Okay. I'm Tim Biggs. I don't share this history, and I'm a lot younger than these guys. I have a different morality. Anyway, grew up in New Jersey in the late 60s. I got so fed up with New Jersey, every weekend right after school on a Friday, I'd hitchhike out and get as far as I could on a Saturday night. And I made it to a lot of cool places, and there were a lot of cool people that would pick up hitchhikers back then. And I saw more than New Jersey, which was such a relief. I bombed out of Rutgers, so in 1971 I came up to Unity, and I couldn't afford living on campus, so I started living in a shack in Montville with another local guy. We made homebrew, we partied, and I'll tell you, it was such a relief to be around young people up here in their early 20s that were non-judgmental. They would say anything they wanted. They'd have practical jokes all the time. it was really a relief, and that made me feel really at home. And we learned a lot of things about living cheap, like going to Floyd Raven's potato field and picking up coals in the field, and we could get 300 or 400 pounds in an afternoon and live on potatoes all winter. And chickens, we raised chickens and all that baloney. Ice fish, hunt, all that stuff. It was fun. It was no judgment, no... Anyway, after I got out of college, I decided, being a macho guy that I am, I'd go up north and cut wood. And that lasted about a year and a half. I was up at Georgia Pacific living in the camps. But it was quite an experience. So after that, I had familiarized, because I got my cars worked on by Bill Terry, and I came to Half Moon Farm, and they kind of invited me to live there for a while, which was so sweet because I learned so much about canning and cutting up animals and burning a lot of firewood, and it was really a sweet time for me. I was there about a year and a half. The farmhouse burnt down. We had already talked about moving to the back of the land and selling the farmhouse. So I lived in a shack back there that I had built the summer before in preparation. And I had the worst winter of my life. I almost had a nervous breakdown. I was so nervous I couldn't talk to people, you know. And because I wasn't around people that much. And it was a terrible time, but it was very enlightening. It really taught a lot about myself. So that next summer, I bought 5 acres from Bruce Mason, which it was Sandy, Bruce, and I were basically the ones left on the farm. And it was a third of a mile off the road, and I built a shack, or tiny house, let's call it. Kind of like Stevie Smith did.
Stevie Miller.
Yeah, Stevie Miller. And I lived back there, and I was just in bliss because I could garden. $25 a year in taxes. I had it made. I could work 3 months out of the year and live the other 9 months. Although, I wasn't qualified to do anything. I had no skills. Forestry courses, to get a forestry job, I'd have to move up to Millinock and forget about it. So I stuck around here and cleaned chicken houses and do cement foundations and blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, I decided, by then I was together with my wife, Pam, and we decided, hey, let's go west every winter. We can work. Maybe we'll find a better place than Maine to live. So we went to Denver, we went to Astoria, Oregon, we went up to Alaska, and came back every year. And we never found a better place with the people relaxed like they are now, and also everything was so cheap. Land was cheap. So I ended up getting sick of walking into my place 7 months out of the year. It was a long haul up a hill. So Pam and I bought some land in Freedom with road frontage and electricity. And I moved back to conventional living, and now I'm a normal guy. So I was very happy to have the experience to move up here. I was so thankful to live where people are sane, and it was awesome. So thank you, Maine.
Okay, the little green thing.
Yeah, you don't have to push anything.
I'm not a singer. Oh, it's really interesting to hear all you. I know it's kind of like old home week right here, the front row. My beginnings wasn't anything like Phyllis's carefully planned. It was all accidents that I ended up here. And kind of traumas, but all really interesting. I was at Bennington College, 350 girls in woods, and I was going to do a 2-month work thing that you're supposed to do in Chicago. Well, the first night there, I was thrown in jail. My only friend there who had a hippie boyfriend was rude to the conductor, and there was 8 of Mayor Daley's finest waiting to greet us and throw us in jail by guilt by association. And I was terrified, but I was kind of thrilled too. Like, this is real life. And 4 months later, Martin Luther King was killed. I was, well, maybe I don't have to bother to be safe. I was with my boyfriend, and it was the first time we'd ever dropped acid. So we were like looking at the wallpaper, Paisley dancing, and everything was cool until we turned on the black and white TV. Martin Luther King has been killed. And the whole city went up in flames, you know, it was scary. 2 months later, Bobby Kennedy was killed. I began to hang out with people who were, and I never had such a big community in my life, really, who were protesting the war and learn about the war. And I did have my head bashed in by the Chicago cops. And after that, I'm not going back to 350 girls in the woods. I mean, things are screwed up and I've got to do something. And so I write the New York Resistance. I don't even know how I knew about them, but I wrote them. And can I volunteer? Yep. So I come there, and some of the people know my friend from Bennington, Debbie Carter, who came up and stayed with me a lot. And so I roomed with her, and we're like, yeah, and began to work at the Resistance, and had another really cool job. And I met people I never would have met before. You know, really different people. So one of my roommates was in the Communist Party, and her tree decoration was this hammer and sickle. And we had to leave the house when she had secret meetings. And, you know, it was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. But we draft councils, we did all sorts of stuff, and eventually had a crazy commune, but, you know, it was pretty interesting. It was in between the guys who were dancing to ale at 4 a.m. and then the meditators would come in at 4:30. And that's when the cops came, is when the meditators had just started meditating. So that worked out just right. But we ended up just meeting people. They were just all around. We all did. You know, kind of like I sit next to Tim Biggs, and who the hell is he? I don't know him. And turned out, you went to Unity College? He said, oh yeah, you used to use the bathroom. Did you know Rosemary St. Clair? Yeah. And she was my boyfriend Peter's younger sister. We used to go there and use the bathroom. So there was connections that showed up. And back at the Resistance headquarters, we were next door in this big complex of Dave Dellinger, and the Catholic worker people were there, and war resistors people who had gone to jail in the Second World War. I was very moved by some of them. And Grace Paley was like our mother. I mean, she was just so kind, and, you know, so we met people we never would. We had, you know, we go to this cheap place for dinner, and there's Abby Hoffman, and then, I don't think I ever met Jerry, but I think he wrote Steal This Book, and it taught us how to get 100 pounds of free rutabagas at Hunts Point Market, and all of that stuff. But then Peter and I, it was dangerous in New York. You know, it's like we didn't want to live there anymore, so we went up to Cambridge, which was like the country to us at first. And all sorts of stuff opened up, the women's meeting, our bodies, ourselves. But then, oh my God, ecology. You know, it's okay to care what you eat and grow good food. And oh God, I'm going to try to speed up. But anyway, that ended up in a walk, an ecology walk. And 10 days by myself at the end, and I couldn't live in the city anymore. So I got the invitation to go up to Franklin. Maple sugarine was great. Learning how to chainsaw, pretty dangerous, but I thought I'd do something. Milking cows. The people, a little tough, but the best part was meeting all of you. I mean, when you people came, it was like a breath of fresh air. I mean, you were nice. And you must have already moved here or knew where you were going, because somebody gave the address. One day, stuck out my thumb. I don't know why I got a ride right there, but I did. And I remember the first night, I felt like I was at home. I looked at the shooting stars. There was a women's meeting. David remembers it. That's how I met David. No. Oh, and but we thought we could do everything, which we couldn't. But we did. You know, we got pregnant, and David and I, we're going to build a cabin. And we upgraded our living situation from a 2-person tent to 4-person that you guys lent us. I remember the frozen asters. It was beautiful. And we were reading by kerosene lantern, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, The Mass Psychology of Fashion. How do we do it? David and I had a fight building the cabin. No, David said we don't need a plan, and I said we need a plan. And he drew a picture of the fight on one of the boards. But we got the cabin built. Later on, we got the place at Southmont, and we just met the people. What I really love, Susan, a lot, and is that Twitchell Hill was a welcoming person. So I got to meet all your brothers and sisters. I think all of them. Ruth's, most of their brothers and sisters. Mary, and then it spread out. And as soon as new people came, we kind of met them, and they were like part of a big us, which I'd never experienced before. And it's the same with the local community. The people that stood up to help us were, I mean, for me, mini Peavy. You know, Laurel had colic. Get her to the Verdier's drugstore and get elixir of catnip and fennel. It's on the back shelves. Carol Flanders, who told us at South Montville all about the history there, I never would have known. Jacking deer every night. You know, I mean, there was just so much richness. So, you know, we had Laurel. That was a big deal. As I already said to Bill Terry, George Penny thought she knew how to deliver. You tie the rope around her feet and pull her out. But we decided not to go that route. By the way, Laurel said this morning, I wish I could be there, because she did experience a lot of us. And I'll just finish with a couple things. You know, Susan's hurrying me up, and I don't like it. But we're used to conflict. And I just remember this meeting at Twitchell Hill where Laurel was tiny and she was in my lap. And I think later in Zafir's lap, and we were arguing. White picket fence, germs. And we go outside to pee, because we had to, Northern Lights. It was gone. And do you remember the town meeting when everybody's yelling at each other? There's no such thing as a good tar road. There's no such thing as a good dirt road. Yes. And then afterwards we have American chop suey and pies together. Okay, Susan, I'm done.
As we said in the beginning, we have so many stories and so much to say that 7 minutes is really not long enough.
I tied myself beforehand and it didn't work.
So I'm the last speaker, and I know that Vernon didn't know. I don't know how, because I sent him emails, but he said he didn't know. Debbie said she wasn't prepared, somebody else, and their stories were great. You know, I, on the other hand, prepared, and I'm going to have to read it. No, it's okay. I'll sort of read it, but I don't have all those. Like, so I loved having that spontaneity, and I have a different approach. So here it goes. And you know, a lot of it's going to overlap, but I just wanted to talk about a few things. Yes, and of course, I came to live in Maine with the group from Boston. Oh, sorry. You watch my time. Yes, and other people talked about the situation there. You know, it was hostile to the way that we wanted to live. We got robbed at knife point, our phone was tapped, there was, you know, all kinds of things going on. And one of the things, we had thought about making this green space for the community in this little empty lot across the street, but of course we couldn't do that. So we were living in a mostly black community neighborhood near Boston City Hall. It was very heavily urban environment. So moving to Waldo County, to a piece of land with no electric lines and a barely passable road, was as far from this reality as one could imagine, right? But what was it really imagined? I mean, I could not, actually. Right. Some people had ideas of what they were coming to, or what they wanted to do here. For me, I didn't have those images yet. I had some impulse. They were vague ideas and still being formed as I visited communes in Vermont, looking for land that we had decided we were going to buy there, but we didn't. And then we turned our search to Maine, and looked in this particular area because Vernon had a friend in Canada. So that's how we ended up here. But you know, when we were looking in Vermont, we looked at a number of places, and it wasn't really just the money. We didn't find that right place. And there was something, as soon as we went to Twitchell Hill, all of us, the group, when we all came up and looked at it, it was just right. It was perfect. It was like this beautiful hilltop full of blueberries and wildflowers and old stone walls with this glorious western exposure. And it was love at first sight. Anyway, but what did we need to do in this piece of land? What were we looking for? Well, we needed space to feel safe and secure and free, to stretch out, to try out new ideas of living, which involved learning how to create a community for the benefit of the members, where we would share our skills and our work and our emotional support and our enjoyment of life of 20-somethings that we had at the time. We were 20-somethings. And we wanted to build a house, of course, and we had all read the Nearings book and visited the Nearings, and they weren't very encouraging. I have to say, coming back from that trip was like a bummer. And also, everything was so perfect there, and we weren't like that. So we realized who we were eventually. We needed a place where we could be accepted, and although we did not really know what that meant, you know, we were sort of, I guess we were kind of geared for hostility or something. But actually what I found, were people who had lived here for generations and viewed us with bemusement, skepticism, possibly suspicion, but who, in that wonderful old Maine way, did not let on how they felt. We never really knew until later when we got to know them better. But at the same time, they extended to us a helping hand, and also, on many occasions, really helped us out, as some people have mentioned here. And to us naive young people, they offered an amazing wealth of knowledge. I mean, they knew so many things. Right. We just were like thirsty. We wanted to. We really wanted to know what they knew. It just seemed so amazing how much knowledge the people here, the farmers and others around here. And so they were our mentors, really. I often think I really didn't understand why I wanted to live here until after I came here. It was the place itself that beguiled me, the land, the woods, the fields, the wildflowers, the streams, Lake St. George, the wild old apple trees you'd come across upon in the woods in a walk, or old cellar holes, or falling down barns. And the rhythm of the seasons filled my spirit as nothing had before, living so close to nature, even in the coldness of winter. But it was, of course, people who make a place, and that's where I wanted to live. In addition to the old-timers and the farmers and the storekeepers, we discovered, as other people have said, other young people who were here quietly came to this area to do similar things, to look for opportunities. Now, these weren't opportunities for financial or career advancement. These were opportunities to live a creative life, right? To live a life doing physical work, making art, planting gardens, and finding opportunities to build a vibrant, caring community. These were the people we met in Freedom, Montville, and Liberty, and beyond. Stuart Brand's new book is called Maintenance, and I haven't read it yet, but the title reminded me of the underlying message in the Whole Earth Catalog, which we found exhilarating. Everything needs maintenance. Learning and sharing skills and knowledge to do so, about taking care of ourselves and each other and our stuff. Phyllis, hold it up. The Whole Earth Catalog. If you haven't looked, well, the old is a later one, but the old, if you haven't looked at it, look at it, because it tells you how to, all kinds of various things that we loved it. It was like, oh yeah, we can do that. And so at Twitchell Hill, I learned to do things like, changing oil on a car, changing spark plugs, and cars had spark plugs back then, mix cement by hand, learn the difference between a joist, a rafter, a ridge pole, a stud. What a plumb line is, I had no idea. How to grow odd vegetables like Jerusalem artichokes and kohlrabi, which I hadn't ever heard of until I came here for some reason. I learned to rake and winnow blueberries. I'm gonna hold it up for you. Thank you, dear. And to make a fire and to cook on a wood stove. Grinding wheat berries into flour may have been partly an economic choice, but it was so much more. It allowed me and us to see the process of making bread from plant to the loaf, to the flour, to the loaf on the table. And that kind of translated into other things in life. So that by doing the processes, the basic processes of things, we learned about them. And even if I don't grind wheat berries anymore, it was such an important thing to do for me. Likewise, things like dyeing clothes, making candles, making pottery. These were things that were ways to participate in the stuff of life, the necessary things, as well as the aesthetic and sensually pleasing things, like the eccentric door hinges.
You're at 7 minutes, just
Okay. Okay, I'm about to say. Anyway, so we had experiences we had never even imagined what they would be. Like planting 10,000 pine trees for Henry Peavy amidst the swarms of black flies. And the magic of sleeping under the stars on a moss-covered rock, and the thrill of our first town meeting in March where we could actually say yay or nay to the town's business. That was so thrilling. I love how we brought on early ideas like the food co-op, which you initiated in Boston, and then someone else said this earlier, how we made cooperative ventures, people created organizations like MOFGA and FEDCO, which still thrive, and others, Maine Visual Artists, and all these groups that started in the 70s that are still going on and grown and affected many more people and included many more people. So anyway, what I felt was the benefit of my experience coming to here was, I hate to say back to the land because I grew up in a city, but my ancestors at some point lived on the land. But I can fix things. I feel more resourceful. I feel like what we did here by learning to do everything, it built a confidence in us, in myself, that I can do things. And that in a larger sense, those early experiences in rural Waldo County and others' parallel experiences have made us understand how much better life is when we cooperate and share and care for and respect nature and humanity. So I just hope those values can once again thrive in our country the way I feel they do still so very strongly here in Maine. And that's all I wanted to say. So now, I think we would like people, a lot of you have had parallel experiences, and so we have another hour or so. I would really like people to either ask questions of the panel or actually give us a story, whatever you'd like. So, Jay.
Can you talk about why the commune didn't hold together?
Oh.
It's probably multiple reasons.
Why the commune didn't hold together?
What was the question?
Phyllis will answer that one.
I think
sorry.
the collective living movement of, communal households didn't continue is because our vision was
Horizontal. We were all the similar age, and none of us had really had to take care of aging parents or ourselves aging or very young children. And so our vision didn't extend to what do you do when there are members of your cooperative group who are unable to be equal participants in it. Am I holding it the wrong way? Sorry. So it was just a failure of like a more extended vision. That's my perspective.
Anyone else?
Just quickly.
Yeah.
I think the reality is there was 18 of us, and there are probably 18 different perspectives on why the collective didn't continue. I don't know how to, I mean, I could tell you my reason, and everybody else could tell you theirs, but I think it served a purpose and a function, and it worked when we first got there, and then the reality of living here brought up other issues that we weren't aware of and didn't think about when we first came here. Earning money?
We were undercapitalized. 10 million would have solved it.
I like to think, when with what Phyllis said, that we're 15 very strong-willed people who really understood a lot of politics and this and that. We were smart and strong and very individualistic in our own way, and that was positive. It put us there, but we couldn't really make. We didn't have one like one thing we were all together about. So we went out and we did well. We did great, and even though the fact that we built that incredible building, and it was just extraordinary what we did. Vernon reminded me that if you look at most communes, they bought a house. There was at least a building. There was something there. But when we went up on that blueberry field, there was nothing. It was just a cold side of the hill, too.
Yeah. I also want to say failure may be, technically, you might say the commune failed, but I think the fact that we're all still friends here and we're all still living the values that brought us together is like another stage, perhaps, that it went to. Yes, here.
Oh, I don't think I'm gonna need that.
Okay.
So how many of you lived in the house? How many years? And
He needs it for recording.
really?
You're good, yeah.
I'm good?
You're pretty loud.
I have mom voice. That's my son. So, how many of you lived there for how many years? And is the building still standing?
Yes.
It's functioning as what? Somebody's living there?
It's in the summertime, yes, and sometimes in the wintertime, other people come and have lived there.
Breaking all the time. I'm almost here every day.
Everybody's story is different.
So is it still common?
No.
No.
Yeah, we're subchapter S corporation. We have a 5-person board of directors. So we are still a commune, but we're, what's that? Oh.
How many years did you guys all live in that as a commune?
Well, we lived together in Boston, and then we went up, I think, we sort of, Jay knows everything.
1 year open.
Okay.
Well, no.
Didn't last to the winter.
No.
They do.
Well,
2 summers, and then it changed, and then people left, and then other people came back. Phyllis was there quite a few years, for example, right?
I consider myself to be a very involved participant for 40 years. I might not have been resident in the house for all of those 40 years. And actually, none of us were, because everybody took a sabbatical to Austin, Texas. I felt that. To Austin, Texas, or whatever, to pursue like degrees. And so I finished my degree in California. So the group living kept shifting according to personal dynamics.
Yeah, I think you can't, a blanket question like that, change is the name of the game. And some of us, if you don't know, who are in couples and having babies, we bought 180 acres for too much money. It was like more than $100 an acre in South Montville.
$25,000 for all that.
Do we have another question?
No, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you finished.
No, I haven't finished.
I want to hear from the audience.
I know you do. Oh my God! Maybe I should sit in the middle. But really, when we moved to South Montville and we took trips up to the hill, we were still in community, even when we left, I used to say, Maine has a way of grabbing your roots. And I feel it. And it brought us back. And even with me, when I was talking about the beginning of the ancestral stuff, who would know? But maybe 6 years ago, I found out almost by accident that my direct ancestors lived almost exactly where I live, starting in 17. So there's another form of rootedness. We're here. We're here. We still know each other. We still know the land. We're still doing this stuff.
That's great, Nia. We want to hear from other people.
I just have a short
okay.
question. Are you all going to move back for the apocalypse?
Years ago.
Okay.
Can you speak near this because he's recording everything?
Okay. Just a quick story. It's a shout out to Troy, Maine, where I met who is now Judith Grace and who is now Mary Weaver, who is Mary Lyon, and Judith Fernald. But the story is that I bought a little farm in 1971 on the Barker Road, and I could see Route 202 from my house. And anyway, the first winter, these clunky trucks were coming up Route 202 day after day with these weird trailers on them with old Coke, they're like the 50 Coke, what do you call them, refrigerators, like we used to grab a soda out of. These are the hundreds of things. It went on. I look out the window and I think, what the heck is this? Well, in the spring, it was Gene Coombs started a farm up there. He was not a real farmer. I would later learn, like I wasn't either. I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, he had gotten a contract with Airborne. For anybody who is young enough, they don't know what that is. It's nowhere backwards. To grow aduki beans, which never materialized. However, between 20 and 30 young people would come and be sleeping in the barn and in tents and all over the place. One fell through a rotten roof one day. Anyway, a number of those people stayed. So that was in Troy. Yep.
All these people here are my aunts and uncles, which I guess makes Twitchell Hill my cousin. My younger cousin. I was also born in 1971, 5 months before Twitchell Hill was started, and I grew up on Choate Road in the satellite group. You're surviving. Yeah. So I grew up here experiencing a different kind of world of back to the land as the next generation, and growing up with the children of the people that you were finding. And it seems like it wasn't as always as synchronous for us, for the kids. There was definitely a very strong line drawn between the locals and the kids from away. And it was sometimes very rancorous, and I wouldn't say violent exactly, but it was often unpleasant. And I mean, Susan, you had an incident with your trailer. There were fights in the schools, there was bullying, which is not where I wanted to go with this. Where I wanted to go is that the growing up with the community and having all of you as my family was pretty amazing. And I went away and I came back, and when I came back in 2007 and I was looking for a job, I didn't know what I was going to do, and it was like a month before I even thought to look at working at the co-op, and Vernon had been there. And I went in and I interviewed, and it was just like I fell into that job, and it was like the most natural thing in the world. I ended up staying there for over a decade, and I got on the board almost immediately. And Debbie was on the board at the time, and I said, this is probably one of the few instances in maybe any organization. It probably happened Probably not the only co-op where it happened, but it's one of the very few co-ops where somebody could serve on the board and say one of the other board members had changed their diapers as a child. So anyway, I'm just incredibly grateful to have grown up in this community. My mom was supposed to be here. She wasn't able to come. But I certainly have lots of sort of vague, somewhat vague memories, because we didn't actually move here until I was 4. 3? That's 3. But yeah, you guys are my family. So,
Pam Smith would like to read a poem. She's a very, very good poet, and she wrote a poem about this subject.
I didn't know anything about Twitchell Hill until I started hanging out with Susan a few years ago. I've known Susan a lot longer, but we've only been neighbors for, I don't know,
5,
10
6 years.
5, 10, something, whatever. So, but anyhow, I did come back 1972. I moved to Maine, 3 days before I graduated from college and right after I got married. So I am of you guys, us guys. This poem is called Self-Sufficient, a Song of Us. We were citizen children of the big success world who chose to live in a small rural community, to not participate in the plastic, war, corporate, big culture which we knew inside and out, being its intimates and hostages, its children from both sides. And we wanted out, to not be seduced by facile promises, to not sell out to profit, to not fight proxy wars, to not poison the air, which we loved, to not be partners in toxic exploitation. We knew the system didn't want us. We stood up and walked away. We bought abandoned farms, overgrown woodlots, built rustic homes that smelled of fresh-cut pine on land we cleaned with our own hands and our friends' hands. Not refugees. We could return to where we came from if we wanted, but we didn't want. We were dreamers, pioneers, in love with making a peaceful, fair world, learning the arts of belonging to what lived beside us, willing to labor without time clock or salary for these gifts. We learned how much we could create and sustain with sweat and common work, alongside facing and loving our bountiful, generous relative, the earth. Listening to our older neighbors who held the knowledge of this place, the season's solid paths, the wisdom of restraint, tolerance of stony ground, and awe at hard-won crops. We proudly drove old cars, ground our own flour, made our own yogurt and granola, sang our own songs, smoked homegrown weed, chopped and stacked wood, made true with our hands the lives we intended. Thank you.
I'm going to mostly follow Zafra's lead on this as the generation down. For those who might have, many of you know me and some of you knew my parents. My dad was Rich Klimoff and my mom was Lee Lord, now Lee Warren. And my dad left me his house in Montville and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. It has more to that tale that we're not getting into now. But I never knew, after he passed away in 2013, I didn't know what to do with the house. I didn't want to lose it. Fought really hard to keep it. But I was living in the West Coast. I was building a life there. And I didn't know, or I was really, if I could ever come back. And in 2020, as aforementioned, was a rough year. And I realized I'd rather be in the woods, decided to come back, and didn't know I would be staying, but have realized I wanted to stay. And it has meant a lot to be not only in Maine in a place that I have connection with the house that my dad built, but also in a community where there's truly no other part of Maine that I'd want to be, and I love Maine. So being back here, it's because of the people and because of all of you, but also because of the influence that you had from those, for those of you who came when you did and built this greater community, because it is, there's many ways it's not very diverse, but there are many ways that it is, and that diversity of character and care and the different people and the way that different communities are able to meld is something that even within the state, when I talk to other people throughout Maine, it is unique still to a degree here. And it's really special, and I'm really grateful because, yeah, there's nowhere I'd rather be.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Dennis Harrington, moved here in '74. I grew up in North Jersey. Anybody got a problem with that? I lived in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and what I remember most about the 70s, early to mid 70s and into the 80s, this sense of possibility that things could happen. I mean, you mentioned the Whole Earth catalog. There also was a book called How to Keep Your Volkswagen Alive. There was Charlie Wing wrote a book From the Ground Up. There was Your Engineered House by Rex Roberts. I mean, all these things, I'd never had any skills doing those, but by reading these books, I figured I could try. Tore down a couple barns and built a house on Fry Mountain. No electricity. Only running water was running down to the creek to get it and bring it back. Had to crank up a generator to get it going. Bought an Army surplus generator in Albion, which didn't run, and had to rebuild that. It was a V4 engine, which I'd never worked on, and updraft carburetor, on and on and on. All these things were obstacles that were in the way. But, you know, you just kind of figured out you did what you had to do. Immediately before I moved here, I was in New Hampshire working for a co-op, and we'd go down to Boston, pick up the produce, and bring it back to Manchester, New Hampshire, divide it up. When I got to Monroe, I mentioned to someone that I had done that, and they said, well, you have a VW bus. I mean, who didn't? And so I get nominated to go down to Boston, pick up produce. I would drop it off in Liberty, and then in Monroe at the community center. And it was like there was this phone tree. As soon as you called and said, I'll be there at 2 o'clock, the phone tree went out. It was like when you call and tell your kids don't have school the next morning or something. You know, it was like that. And it was like a bunch of bees would just show up, take everything apart, break down and then have to leave the community hall broom clean. But eventually I grew into being the co-op because there were enough people that were interested in it. Again, it was one of these things that kind of grew up organically because there was a need. And you felt like, well, maybe we can do it. You know, let's try it anyway. We don't really know how it's going to end up, but let's give it a try and let's see what we can come up with.
So I moved up in mid-70s from Connecticut, and for the first year that we owned the land, we commuted every weekend to build a foundation and to ready the wood for the house. And that was probably the best time of my life I've moved ever. But that was in Burnham, and people forget that that's part of Waldo County. And we had looked at a piece of land on Freedom Pond, but it was near the dump. And we ruled it out, and now I kick myself every day that we didn't buy that piece of land, because I would love.
Don't go there, we all have those stories.
Anyway, I remember that, I think it was Squidge Davis said this years ago, that Waldo County seems to be where all the misfits end up, and they all get along well together. I'll end on that.
I like that.
So after bouncing around in California and teaching high school out there, I was looking for a commune to live in California, and they were all disasters. I visited 3 or 4 of them, and I never lived there. And after circumstances ended me in Maine, and I got another teaching job, eventually I ended up in Pownell at Collinsbrook School, where Peggy Albright, who is part of the Twitchell Hill community, was cooking. And we ended up, there was only one house to be available to us to live in. And so we lived together in this little cabin. And she had been involved on her way to Nova Scotia to help build the house at Twitchell Hill back in 1971 or so. And so when that didn't work out in Nova Scotia, she ended up visiting Twitchell Hill, meeting somebody who worked at Collinsbrook School. They needed a cook, so she ended up being the cook. And then I met her, and then I started hearing about Twitchell Hill. She moved up there the year before I did in '75, and she started working at the Strawberry Field School their first year. And so I kept hearing about it, and I said, oh, I got to visit. And so I started hitchhiking up to Twitchell Hill. It was really funny, too, because as I would get close to the Montville, Liberty area hitchhiking, I always got a ride right to Twitchell Hill because everybody wanted to see it. You know, it's like, I've heard about that, you know, I want to go there. So, and also in one of my hitchhiking trips, my wife now, Leslie, who was here but also has the cold, picked me up hitchhiking. So we actually met. She thought I was totally into myself because all I could talk about was Twitchell Hill. And so she wasn't, you know, and then later we started working at Fedco together, and that's when we got together. And in terms of why people left Twitchell Hill, part of it was because there were always attractive things, and Leslie had lived on a commune and hated it, and so she was never going to live on a commune, so it was a choice I had to make. And but I still am involved with the group, and I've been doing blueberries up there since 1976, and Rich's, Lauren's dad's truck is up at Twitchell Hall right now. So the community lives on, and it's really wonderful to see everybody here. And I'm so sorry, I have a cold.
I asked to share because I'm probably the newest newbie in the room. Our family has lived in Freedom since 2024. This is our second time. Oh, I'm being invited to stand up. This is our second time living in Waldo County, but it's really incredible hearing how many of the things you all are sharing are still true. It's really hard to find affordable land. It's really hard to keep affording that land. This is our fourth farm, and that's not by desire. We would have loved to stay on any of the first three. But it's that sense of, and to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot of sense of possibility at this age and this phase of life now. It sometimes feels like we are trying to find community in the times of great dying. But yet it's incredible how those values still matter so much. How deeply I long to raise my son in community, how much we long to feed our neighbors and to be nourished by having a village of people who are taking care of one another and trying to figure out so many of the things that you all said, like learning how to live through the laboring, understanding what requires to be alive, and really learning, you know, how much is in that process of everything that we do and everything that we consume just to stay alive. And also that sense of just like, oh, we're home. Like we're finally home. And so it's really incredible to hear all of these stories coming from so long ago and also be like, oh, these are such similar themes in our lives still. Wow. So thank you for everything you shared.
I don't know if Vernon would agree with me about this, but there was a business plan for Twitchell Hill. And the business plan was, speaking of Erewhon, was to grow daikon radishes for Erewhon. That was the business plan. What do you think, Vernon? Am I close?
I remember something. I know we did squash that died in the field from Erewhon.
Anyway, that was when someone was talking about whatever it was in there. We had a business for it. It did not happen.
Oops. I didn't remember that business plan. Interesting.
You don't remember that?
Now I do, now I do. I just wanted to say that the group process that we're talking about in like, as if it were really always simpatico, wasn't. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of really different ideas on all different levels, personal, emotional, intellectual, and so forth. So we were not just swimming in a sea of agreement on anything, ever. We had meetings that lasted until we all had to pee, and that was, and it was great because we could only pee outside, which meant we could go see the sky, which really made a difference in group process. So we were blessed to exist in a time before the internet. Absolutely blessed. I feel sorry for the generation now who never has a moment where they're in the present moment and only with the thing that is around them or the people that is near them, and things aren't dinging off like bringing them to where else. So we were blessed by that and able to actually go through all the learning that we had to do, including with how to make relationship to each other, because we were all so extremely different and motivated by different things and heading in different directions. It's a wonder that we actually stayed in connection for as long as we did. The one last thing I'll say that I'm always really proud of, having heard many stories of communes around the country, I'm really proud of the fact that we never developed a cult leader. I'm not kidding. I got so sick of stories of communes where there's one man sleeping with all the women and then it all falls apart. Like, enough already. We didn't do that. And I think apparently we stood out in that respect. We had more truly egalitarian, complicated relationships. Thank you, Phyllis. You know, when you talking about, she said, how did people know anything? And how they know something was going to happen without social media? And of course, we all know the many, there was so, you know, whether it was leaflets or phone calls or word of mouth or many other places. Hitchhiking.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up about not being a leader, because I was going to say something about that. Because I don't know how many people, when we were living up there, and I'd run into someone and said I was from Twitchell, and they wanted to know who the leader was. And there isn't any leader, and there was like, what? There has to be a leader. No, there's no leader. We didn't come up here with an agenda, and, you know, it wasn't that way. And I think it's true that we were very unique in that respect. We did have a business plan, yes. Not a good it did us. We had a business plan. The other thing I wanted to say is this is also my perspective as one of the people who lived there. We moved up from the city. Some of us had lived in New Hampshire in a rural setting for a while, but basically we were city people who moved up here. And we had ideas of what we wanted to do and how we wanted to be, but we also had grown up in an environment where you stepped out the door and there was a whole other world. There were other people, there were meetings going on, there were things to do. Up at Twitchell, you stepped out the door and there were trees and fields and blueberries, and that was it. And I think for some of us, we needed more to keep ourselves going than just the energy of our thoughts of what we might accomplish there. That's just my perspective.
I had to think about what I wanted to say on this topic. My husband and I came to Freedom in '78. We had our house built for us, but we definitely, in raising our children and going to the public school system, we definitely benefited from the thoughts and contributions that I'm going to call them back-to-landers, brought into Waldo County and to our public school system. I'm sorry, but I did know there was differences between the students that were from families that were embedded in the community versus the newcomers. But my daughters definitely benefited from the diverse thinkers that the back-to-landers brought to the community, and it did make a difference in our family life. So I just want to thank you for becoming involved in the community and with the school system and beyond. I mean, there was a whole community in Monroe, Brooks, all over the Waldo County that contributed to the public school system. Thank you.